I'm calling this meeting to order, the Places29 Rio Community Advisory Committee. David, would you read the county notice, please?
Yes. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with an emergency ordinance number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at the meeting are Judy Slushel, Marty Meth, Steve Davis, Tom Paoletti, Todd Cohn, Martha Davis, Nancy Hunt, Ned Galloway, Board Liaison, and Dan Bailey, Planning Commission Liaison, is present. I also see Audrey Coker, Lee Condor, and Nicole Scrow. I think that covers all the committee members, unless I missed somebody. Staff present is Serena Gruria from our Cape office, David Benish from Community Development, and Carolyn Schaefer, Planning Commission Clerk.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear, it's Marty Davis or Martha Davis on a camera, but not Steve Davis. That's her husband. She was using her husband's cell phone before.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Just reading names.
Yes.
My apologies.
So the next order of business is approval of the 12/16/21 last December's meeting minutes. Anybody have any comments, corrections? Judy? And you have to unmute yourself, please. Can't hear you, Judy. Oh, you're squeaky. Go ahead. No, we don't hear. Want to email the correction in and it's all right. Okay, thank you. So I have a motion to approve the minutes, please.
Move to approve.
Okay, second.
Aye.
Thank you. All in favor, raise your hands.
Aye.
Thank you, Nancy. Anybody abstain? Judy, you're coming through now. Squeaky still. I don't know what the answer is to that. I still don't have. So, okay, so there's nobody against it. So the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is elections for offices for the committee for this year. Nominations for president.
I would like to nominate Marty for one more term as president.
I'd like to second that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so,
There's nobody else. I suggest we do this by acclamation.
okay. So all in favor, just raise your hand, please. Thank you. So that's noted by acclamation. So I would note that Peter and Brian also have joined us. So I think we have everybody except for Rick right now. Thank you. So I need the next office is for vice chair. Do I have a nomination for vice chair? You can self-nominate if you would like.
Oh, I'm willing to do it another year.
Okay, Lee? Again, okay, so thank you. So
We second it.
Nicole?
I just second it.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay. So all in favor, let's raise our hands and thank you, Lee. And we need a secretary. May I have a nomination for that? Tom?
Well, I'll do it again for a year.
Okay, thank you really
Okay.
very much, Tom. Okay. Well,
Second.
thank you. So all in favor again, thank you. And we'll get on past. Okay, so thanks a lot, everybody. And thanks for volunteering. The next item on our agenda is the Ryle Road Corridor Plan. Daniel Heyer, again, why don't you introduce, you'll take the microphone and introduce your staff one more time and who's here supporting you.
Marty, I'm going to take the first part, which is very
Okay.
short, and then I'll
Okay.
let Daniel introduce himself as we get into phase two.
Okay, fine, thank you.
But just real quickly on phase one, we wanted to let you know that the consultants and staff are completing the review of the written draft of the phase one corridor plan. The recommendations in the plan for the major projects have not changed since the last time that we went over the plan with you, I believe in November. This is just the written document that will be drafted, that document that'll be ultimately heading towards the board. The document is drafted to be sort of a short, focused, and to the point read with supporting detailed and more detailed information to be provided in an appendix. The full appendix will be completed at a later date with the draft of both phases. What you'll see online is about a 20-page document, including a short appendix that has some of the essential maps and plans to help you read the main body of the document. It'll be posted online the week of next week, the 31st, hopefully on the 31st. A comment opportunity will be provided online at the site, but no other public vetting will be done on the written phase of the phase one document until the phase two document is completed, and they'll be brought together and move forward as one document. But we are asking these CAC members to review this draft over the next month. And we would like to give you an opportunity to ask us questions and provide your comments at next month's meeting on that written draft in February. So we'd like to use you as sort of a early proofer and reader and give us some feedback. And again, the document is going to be moving forward to the board once the phase two document is completed, and then they can be merged together and moved forward for review and action to the board at that time. So that's kind of the way that we're stepping through this. So again, we'll let you know. I'll email you when it's posted, or Serena will once we get it posted. But your assignment for us is to take a look at it over the next month and provide us your feedback on it in next month's meeting. And that's it. If you have any questions, or Daniel, if you have anything that you wanted to add to that.
Daniel, before you get started, I just want, Audrey, I think you're not muted. I think we're hearing a little bit of sound. I wonder if you could mute yourself, please.
I don't hear anything, but I'll
Oh,
be glad to do that.
yeah, if you don't mind right now, just to be clear, because I hear some interference. Thank you.
I think Tom Paoletti is also not muted, but I hear that as well, Marty. I'm getting some background noise. Okay, I guess now's my turn to jump in. As David mentioned, the draft of the phase one report study document will be available for you to review over the next month from the website where all the other documentation is, and we would be eager to receive your comments and feedback. Although, like David said, I don't think at this point there would be anything surprising or unheard of by anyone who would review it. It's all basically a review of where we've been, and we've captured the feedback and the comments and tried to incorporate everything that we heard. So tonight, we're going to jump into phase 2. And then when we come back a month from now, we'll get your feedback on the phase 1 documents. And 1 month from now, I will not be here, but Ryan Cheney and Kendra Patrick from our team will be leading you through the next steps, which will they'll start to become a little more rhythmic with what we present, what we ask, and what we're getting feedback on. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you can see it. And we will go. So tonight, Rye Road Corridor Study Phase 2, and we'll be discussing specifically a portion of the corridor from John W. Warner Parkway to Penn Park. And I misspelled Penn Park on the cover sheet, so please excuse that. That was a typo. Our presentation tonight is in 5 parts. Brief recap. We will review background data that our firm has been compiling and paying attention to and reading through. We will discuss pending changes to the corridor. This portion of the corridor. We'll present a few ideas for consideration and thought, and then we'll get your feedback, ask some questions, and we'll reflect together on what we've presented. So with that, we'll start with part 1, which is the recap. Again, you've seen this before. We'll start with this probably every time. We're in phase 2, and this image shows kind of where that is in relationship to the corridor as a whole. Phase 2 is from the city line to the John Warner Parkway intersection. When we met a month ago, we had an introductory conversation, and during that time, we broke the corridor down, the phase 2 corridor down. I'm just going to say the corridor from tonight on, and when I say that, I mean the phase 2 portion of the corridor. We broke the corridor down into 3 parts, north, central, and south, and each of those areas had different characteristics, different challenges, different futures in terms of what's available to the development community in the days ahead. And so for tonight, we're actually going to focus in on the north portion of the corridor. And I think this is an appropriate place to start because there's a lot of activity in the near future here. And then the next month, we'll work our way down the corridor each CAC meeting. As a brief recap, and this again is not unfamiliar to you, but as we think about what we're wanting to promote and recommend, we do so through these kind of 4 icons, which is safety, the character or the aesthetics of the corridor, how we're creating connections, both for bikes and peds and cars and transit, and then how does it work? How well does it work? Are we making things better? Are we helping the corridor and the people who use it to move with efficiency and safety? So with that brief intro, let's jump into the background data of part A, or the north part of this corridor. So what I'm starting here with is where we often start, and these are published road volumes of the corridor. This is coming from Vdot's database. And what we see is that this portion of Rio Road is, at least as of the year 2019, carrying about 9,300 vehicles per day. That's Rio Road. We're seeing that Penn Park Road carries about 4,400. Penn Park Lane, that's the road that goes down to Laughlin Hills, that carries about 1,000. The John W. Warner Parkway, again, carrying around 19,800. And Dunlora Drive carries about 2,400 vehicles per day. So this is sort of a base note for our consideration. This is what in 2019, every engineer in the area looking at these types of projects was looking to use as their baseline traffic volumes. But since 2019, things have been changing. Several things have changed of note. Laughlin Hills has continued to develop and bring more vehicles and more neighbors and more residents in the area. The Lofts apartment has come online. With it, again, more neighbors, more residents, high density multifamily there. Dunlora Park has come online and begun to contribute some vehicles to both the corridor and both the north and the south portion of this corridor, phase 1 and phase 2. So these are projects that were not included in those 2019 volumes, but we're beginning to make sure that we account for. But this isn't all that is joining the corridor's traffic volumes. There's also some more work coming our way in the near future. And again, you know about this, but we're just acknowledging that we know about it too, and that we've counted for it in our work. Rio Commons is a by right development that is coming our way, and it's in this northern portion of the corridor we're looking at tonight. Rio Commons will contribute around 300 vehicles per day to the corridor. Rio Point, which has been a very visible project for all of you, will be contributing around 1,800 vehicles per day to the corridor. And then for us, there's obviously a very big question mark. Maybe you all know better than I do, and I'd be curious to hear back from you on this, but there's a very large, or two very large farms behind Dunlora. We're calling that Dunlora Farm, but that is several hundred acres of land that's zoned R4. And so if that ever were to be developed, that would certainly be a consideration of traffic volumes that may end up in this vicinity. We've left that number blank for now. We don't know the viability of if it truly could be developed at R4 density, but it's certainly something on our radar to think about. And Nicole's got her hand up, so maybe you know something I don't, and I'd love to listen to it.
Oh yeah, no, I think there was
Go
a
ahead,
site
Nicole.
plan submitted for that property last year, I think.
Yeah, there is.
Okay. I haven't.
And we'll be providing that information. There is some question about what was approved and what density is ultimately achievable. That's why it's kind of a question mark right now. But I'll actually have a little bit of that for you at a later date, and we're forwarding that to the consultant.
Yeah, please send that to us. Appreciate it. I'd love to see where they're connecting their access point, because that could be a lot of traffic. Daniel Bailey, you've got your hand up.
I say the continued build out Belvedere, where I live in the backside, it's connected into Dunlora. So I don't know how that factors into. I know that, you know, you can make the assumption that they're all coming down Belvedere Boulevard, but yeah, in the current state, a lot of them don't. They actually cut through, if they're going downtown, cut through Dunlora because they can hit the stoplight there. So I don't know if that, I don't see that factored here in the continued build out of Belvedere.
The continued build out of Belvedere is in that document we mentioned, the phase 1, where we talk about the projected volumes of Belvedere specifically. If they're using Dunlora to cut through now, they won't be for much longer. When the new roundabout goes in, that left-hand turn toward downtown won't be there. So I doubt that they'll be continuing to do that. Audrey, let's
Yeah,
just go with a round of questions and comments now.
I was wondering
ahead.
if there are any other possibilities for Belvedere build out and Dunlora Farms to enter another highway rather than Rio.
I think it's probably highly unlikely just due to the topography and the Ravenna River being there. So I think it's a highly unlikely situation.
I wanted to hear that from you. Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Marty, you're next.
Point out,
You're muted, Marty.
you've left out Dunlora Forest in the middle of that. There's over 100 homes there. And so there's
I
traffic.
believe that's actually in, I believe the Dunlora Forest numbers are in the 2019 Vdot counts.
Well, where is it shown on your, I mean, you've used everybody else except for Dunlora Forest. Where is that shown?
Dunlora Forest is shown, it's right here. It's kind of hiding underneath.
Yeah, no, yeah, but and you think it's in the 1,100 vehicles per day count?
I think it's included in the number that Vdot's already published. That's my intuition about having gone through all the documentation, that development was in place prior to 2019, or mostly built out at that time.
Can we ask Kevin to validate that, to make sure that's the case?
Yeah, we can. Absolutely.
Please do that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. If not, then that number is going to continue to tick upward. Judy, go ahead. Hopefully we can hear you this time.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I'm going to take two more. yeah, I'm gonna take two more questions, and we can always come back at the end too. I don't want to get completely derailed, but two more questions, Judy and then Audrey.
Okay, so is this better?
Yes,
Oh,
I can hear
okay,
you.
good, good. Okay, the other very small subdivision, but it's still cars, is Dunlora at Shepherd's Ridge. So it's a handful of cars, but you know, every car counts. So we need to make sure that they're included in the count.
Okay, great. We'll
Okay.
double check that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yep. All right, Audrey.
At what point would traffic lead to so much that further development would be prohibited?
Well, that's a very interesting way to ask that question. Development is usually based on land use, and so if a piece of land is zoned for a particular use, it can be developed by right. That's what we're seeing right now with Rio Commons. It's a by right development. They can just do it. So it has nothing to do with how much traffic is or is not on the road already.
Whoa. So we can just have a real crowded, dangerous situation.
There certainly have been
Well, that's why we're talking
instances where VDOT hasn't approved development because it's unsafe.
Is that something that you think's happened along this corridor, Nicole? Okay, I have not experienced that personally, but maybe that could happen.
Not along the
Okay.
border. Sorry. I
Couldn't hear her answer.
Yeah, Nicole, you want to come back one more time? Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I don't think it was along the corridor that we're talking about between phase 1 and phase 2 of this corridor study. So in other words, if it is unsafe, VDOT won't approve it. If it is, they will approve it.
Thank you.
Are you saying specifically the development or the entrance to the development?
The entrance to the development, which effectively renders, I mean, you could certainly build at lesser density so that it would be safe, I suppose. I mean, you know that better than anyone, better than me probably, but okay, anyway.
Yeah, that's a very probably nuanced and specific situation, and we're going to try to talk here as generally as we can. These are all good questions. The intent of talking about this is that the roadway currently carries some volume of traffic. Let's go ahead and call it 9,300 vehicles per day because that's what VDOT told us it was. But that we all know together that the traffic is growing and that number is increasing because of development. And that's why we're here talking about this, so we can kind of help make decisions that point us all in a preferred or safer or better looking or some other condition that we can collectively work on together. So traffic isn't increasing, and this is what it might look like. Okay, I'm gonna try to go to the next. Uh-oh, now my computer's frozen. That's great. Here we go. Sorry, let's start it over again. Okay, cool. And then obviously something we're always keen to check in on is crash data for VDOT. And this is actually the corridor as a whole, all 3 parts. But you can see that there's a fair number of accident crashes that have happened along the corridor. Some of them are single vehicle driver, either not aware, making a decision that was individual. And then there's been a few multi-vehicle crashes, no fatalities along the corridor, but some injuries. And so there is an opportunity for safety improvements. And it's also something to be thinking about as traffic does increase, that traffic crashes will also likely increase, and we can try to help create situations that are safer. So that was some entry level background data on the corridor. Now we're gonna, and again, you all are aware of a lot of this, but we're talking about pending changes to the corridor. I'm gonna introduce a diagram to simplify how we're looking at this. And so this is me showing you what this diagram is gonna represent. On the left is John Warner, and on the right is Penn Park. They're both signalized intersections currently. So as we transition now away from a map and just to a diagram, that's what we're representing. Penn Park on the right, John Warner on the left. And in between, for this almost 2,000 linear feet of roadway, between the two signalized intersections. We have Dunlora Forest, which is currently a full access intersection, and we have Dunlora Drive, which is also a full access intersection. And now we are introducing at least 2 more developments into this stretch of road. And with those developments, we're going to see some changes in the near term. And this is simply meant to show, this is my work on starting to understand what's happening. But we can see that within 2,000 linear feet of roadway, the roadway is getting much more complex very, very soon. We're going to see Dunlora Forest Drive basically become a full, basically intersection with Rio Commons coming in directly across from that. Rio Point will have a full access intersection in there. They'll also have a secondary intersection that's a right-in only. And that right-in only intersection shown, let me get my marker, where'd it go? There it is, yep. This will be a right-in only intersection, but this is also not very far away from Dunlora Drive. And so it's gonna need an access management exception request to actually allow that. And this is where I think what Nicole was saying, Vdot can weigh in on things. Vdot's going to have to approve this current design that the Rio Point team is pursuing because the spacing is not adequate with Vdot standards. And then Dunlora Drive is becoming a right-in, right-out intersection. And then there'll be a non-yielding right turn onto Rio Road from Rio, and then of course the roundabout at John Warner. So this is all to say that over the near term, what was that, my marker here? The roadway is going from this to this. So it's getting increasingly dense and increasingly complex, and our recommendations need to consider this and account for this. So with that, I'm going to start to share some ideas. I'm going to build upon what you just saw. Obviously, change is sometimes welcome, sometimes not, but it is an opportunity to try to integrate things and make things work together. And so what I'm seeing when I think about what's coming to the corridor, there's a few opportunities that I think are key that we need to be looking at. I'm going to start with bicycle and pedestrian connections. Obviously, the Rio Point development is a great opportunity for us to create a non-corridor connection from Rio Road to the Greenway. And as far as I know, they intend to include that connection, but I do think it would be really helpful if this study and the feedback from this CAC and this citizen group in general can help us point to where that connection might fit best and might be most logical. But you can see that if that connection is successfully put in, it would be really helpful for someone who, say, lives in Dunlora Forest and wants to get to the Greenway. It might make it a little easier than going through the John Warner Rio intersection or down to Penn Park. So to the Penn Park Road intersection, that is. So there's an opportunity for a great off-corridor connection in the Greenway network. So that's something we're going to want to push for. That would be really well supported by a mid-block crossing somewhere in that corridor or some kind of crossing at one of these intersections. What exactly that looks like at the moment, I don't know, but I do think somewhere between Dunlora Forest and the primary entrance to Rio Point, we would want to be looking to get pedestrians across the road and onto this future Greenway connection. So I think that's something we're going to want to look into as we continue to develop our work. And finally, there's only going to be one small little piece of road where there's a missing shared use path, and that's basically from Rio Commons to the Waldorf School. There'll be a couple hundred feet missing of shared use path, and I think this is actually probably a really ideal county project, probably with local dollars, just to put in a few hundred feet of shared use path and actually get that path all the way then from Penn Park to John Warner with a shared use path. So that'd be a great amenity and a great connection to make for the community at large. So those are some bicycle and pedestrian connections we're going to be playing with over the coming month, and we'll obviously want to hear your feedback here as soon as I can finish my slides. This is a graphic that I put together just so that I could understand what was happening between Penn Park and John Warner. And again, this is 2,200 feet of roadway. And with all of these developments and all of these entrances, I was trying to figure out who's turning right, who's turning left where, and what's happening. And you can see that between John Warner and Penn Park, there'll be 11 discrete different types of movements happening in that typical section, starting on the left all the way to the right. And if you want to know what this looks like, it looks kind of like this. It's where you have turn lanes coming in and coming out and jumping in and jumping out, and you have a road that just continues to kind of grow and swell and shrink in width to accommodate all of these turn lanes. And so it's not hard to imagine that from Penn Park to John Warner, the roadway could end up looking something like this, where it's, well, it is what it is, but when I see roadways like this, I think they're checking a lot of boxes. It's got a sidewalk and it's got a bus stop and it has all these things, but it is lacking, I think, a unified character and cohesion, specifically aesthetically. And so I think we're going to want to talk a little bit more specifically of what the character of this roadway can be in consideration of all of these different movements that we're going to have to accommodate. So I'm thinking there's kind of two ways to come at this unification of this stretch of road. I think one is to take ownership of what this typical section of roadway wants to be or should be, and then basically have the development come and try to fit with that. That might mean that the median is planted as opposed to striped. It might mean that instead of it being, swelling and shrinking in width, it stays more uniform. But I think there's an opportunity for us to basically dictate what that's going to look like in more of a unified manner, as opposed to one project adding on to the next and kind of a, patchwork type typical section. The other option, I think, and this is a curious thought to me, and it sounds kind of crazy at first, but it's at least worth thinking about. We could consider another roundabout at Penn Park Road. And I'm not trying to throw roundabouts everywhere, but before we go too far in that, it's not the first time that it's been considered. In fact, the county has already applied for a smart scale project there in the past. It was unsuccessful, as I understand it, but a lot has changed since this application was submitted. And what this might do, and this is why I bring it up, and I'm curious to hear from you all about this idea. What it could do is it could let us make all movements along the corridor right in, right out. It would let us get rid of all of those turn lanes and all of those movements. And it basically then the roundabout on either side of this stretch of road becomes your left-hand turn, right? If you want to make a left-hand turn, you have to use a roundabout to get around and then make a right-hand turn. While that sounds inconvenient at first, and I confess it might be inconvenient for some people in the way that they use the corridor, what it can do is actually shrink the size of the road considerably. And here, this is actually a roundabout that our firm designed and had built in a similar type context, residential area. But you can see, it's at least a good representative. You can see where the road used to be. This all used to be pavement. It was, turn lanes and width of road. And now what you see is that the road is, much narrower and smaller and less dominating in the landscape. And so if a roundabout were to be considered here, and I'm not saying it should or that it is, I'm just tossing it out there as an idea, it gives us a little more control over the roadway, because then the roadway then responds to the intersections instead of vice versa. So here we have a corridor that has a lot of complexity, a lot of lanes, a lot of movements going different directions. We can try to bring unity to it, and we should, or we can change how the road and the intersections interact and see if we might be able to design a place that actually is more comfortable or more beautiful or has more character. So it's certainly an idea, and I think that as far as I currently know, these are really the only two opportunities I see available that aren't just like really out of left field. So if we want to bring unity to this stretch of road, which is happening, how do we do it? Where are the opportunities? And what is the desire? And so I'm coming back to safety, I'm coming back to character, I'm coming back to connectivity and function. That's kind of our hallmark ideas of what we're trying to promote. And so yeah, there's opportunities to improve what's coming and make it work, and there's opportunities to maybe guide it, excuse me, in a slightly different direction. And so I'm gonna now open it up. I do want to hear from you all. I think I'm sure some of this was review and some of it may be some new information, but I'd love to hear from you if the way we're thinking about this is at all resonating with you, if you think it's helpful, if we're missing the mark. I'd love to hear that too. But we want to try to get out ahead of this so that we can start to advise on the way these neighborhoods front on the road, how they engage with the road, and how the county can plan to handle that work. So at least as an introductory question, it's kind of twofold. We can try to work on the typical section and create uniformity, but the roadway will be broader and it'll look like what we showed. Or we can try to improve the intersections and try to let the roadway to respond accordingly. And so here's those visuals of kind of two ideas of how we can be approaching this. So I'm going to open it up to Marty at the moment, or whomever, to begin to work through some conversation. But this is our first pass. So what we want to do is we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. And then over the next month, we're going to try to put some designs in place, right? So we're bringing this to you tonight in diagrammatic and kind of representative concept form so that we can hear from you and then bring back some drawings in a month. So with that, I'd love to let our conversation begin.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I'm going to just let the members speak first. I happen to live, by the way, as an aside in Dunlora Forest, so I'm going to speak last about what you've said. So Tom, you had your hand up, and then Peter, and we'll go down, and Audrey. So we'll do, that happens to be what I see on my screen. And Nancy, I don't, if you have any questions too, just shout out somewhere in the middle. Tom, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm just curious, the accounts that you had, the 9,600 and the anticipated counts of another 4,000 to 5,000. For this kind of road, how heavy is that compared to other roads you study?
I mean, every road is different. I don't want to say that it's heavy. A 2-lane road, like think about John Warner Parkway. I mean, it's a 2-lane road that's carrying like 20,000 vehicles per day. I don't think we should let the numbers distract us from all the ways that cars move, right? These are just ideas. These are numbers. These are analytics. It's not necessarily representative of you, Tom, going to the grocery store in your car on Tuesday. These are just kind of how we think about things analytically. I think the road has the capacity to handle the volume of vehicles. I think how the intersections work is probably the bigger question of how this will be successful or not.
Oh yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for. Given the road and the closeness of all these people living there, it's a lot of traffic, I guess, but I don't know. I don't know what traffic counts relate to. I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I was just trying to get an idea. Is this like heavy for this kind of narrowness and compactness, or because that had kind of a general feeling as to what I would suggest would be a better option.
What I can say is that the increased vehicles per day will be observable and it will be felt. It'll mostly be noticed and felt during the evening and morning peak hours, right? What we have been told from the traffic studies we've been able to review is that the detriment is not much. Like we're not talking a 10-second delay to a 4-minute delay. That's not what we're talking. We're talking more like maybe a 10-second delay to a 12-second delay. So it's not going to be, at least that's what the numbers are telling us. You know, obviously you can never predict human behavior, but I think that the roadway has capacity for the increase. I think that the intersections need to be thought through thoughtfully, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, Tom. I would say this. I seem to remember that reading before John Warner Parkway, the road was had about 17,000 vehicles per day, 15 to 17. And we can check that, and you should. I mean, that would give you absolute maximum capacity, a number if somebody's interested in it. I'll go back to Tom and see if I can dig that out again, because that's in some of the history.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, just to add, when it was that high before John Warner, there was also a lot less traffic along this route coming in at these intersections. I mean, Dunlore Forest wasn't there. I mean, I remember when Penn Park began, River Run was developed. And before those days, it didn't matter because there was no one else coming. It was just all from downtown out to 29. There was nothing in between, very little. But now we've got all this stuff in between. And then you've got the added traffic coming down from farther north to 29. So you've got a great increase in traffic, and a lot of it is very local, and the rest of it is not. So you've got a very different picture from what it was 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, oh, I'm not justifying it. I just was trying to add the information. Okay, thank you. We'll come back there and see how Daniel handles it. Peter, please.
Daniel, thanks for your presentation. I appreciated how you did this. I generally, based on the more I read reports and studies and just my own use locally and nationally and internationally, even when I got to do that kind of travel, is bad intersections, dumb traffic lights, and I don't mean dumb by being there, but just how poorly they work. The more we can eliminate those and use traffic circles, I think the better for vehicles. And I'm certainly a fan of road diets to be more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. That's a kind of overview, and it seems to fit from the little bit I've seen here, at least enough to have it designed that way. My question is, in this section, how it would impact the pros and cons on public transit being an integral part of this corridor today and going forward.
Peter, is your question about how the public transit would be affected by the intersection options?
But the two basic options you're presenting itself, kind of an old school and new school, pros and cons for public transit.
Well, public transit, I can't speak for them, but what I can say is there is trends in how they make their decision making about what is preferable. In the past, it was bus pull-offs, and now it seems like what they're preferring is actually to use turn lanes, to use a turn lane as a bus stop, which would really look more like this. Although, so what we see here is actually, I don't understand that they actually prefer this anymore. They probably would not do this today. They would actually just use the turn lane if we were to do this now. So I kind of feel like these things change every 3 to 5 years, depending who's in charge of the transit authority and trends in design. So transit I think it can be equally integrated either way, to be honest with you. So, and I think I want to have a little more conversation with the Rio Point project about what, if anything, they're planning to do to integrate transit. I'd like to learn more about that. So it's certainly on our minds to explore that a little more, but we haven't made any determination yet. So that's a great question, Peter, and we'll make sure we come back with some more thoughts on that next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I see I have hands up from Audrey and Judy and Nicole. You've all sort of spoken. I have Nancy on the phone, so I'm going to let Nancy go next, and then I'll come back down the line in the order I just mentioned. Nancy? Let's see if she hears me. She texted me, so let me just see what's happening for a second. Okay, while I'm waiting, if Nancy, Audrey, why don't you go? You're on top of my screen. So, okay, please. And I'll see what happened with Nancy.
Great, thank you. I thank you very much for the presentation. It looks beautiful and well thought out. Most of us here are asking questions about amounts of traffic and how that would impact designs that would alleviate those traffic issues. My question goes to that too, in a way, but in a different way. Are there ideal amounts of traffic on a road that make roundabouts more helpful? Or does traffic get to a point where the roundabouts are not helpful?
I hate to be an engineer when I get questions like this, but it's just how my mind works. It can be both. Roundabouts can be really, really helpful to move traffic continually, right? So can signalized intersections. I think it has a lot to do with one of the biggest things that weighs in is the presence of pedestrians and their ability to cross. Pedestrian crossings can actually make a signalized intersection operate much less effectively because of sometimes the crossing, like the current John Warner Rio intersection is a fantastic example of this. The crossing distance for a pedestrian is, well, very long. It's like 100 feet. And that takes, a long time. The timing for that and the signal takes a long time, and that can throw the intersection into a poor level of service. Roundabouts generally operate more effectively because of how they manage the traffic. And they generally seem to be safer for pedestrians, especially if they're single lane, small roundabouts. I'm not saying it's a one size fits all solution. I think for me, the roundabout that we showed on this presentation is more of a thinking exercise of which problem solves more of our challenges. And because neither situation is perfect. I think we want to try to make the best situation. So I want to hear from you. I think do we prefer to try to manage the roadway or try to prefer to manage the intersections and the design choices that come with that? And I don't know that I'm being helpful at this point answering your question.
Well, it sounds like the solutions are how to help pedestrians, and I don't think there's much pedestrian traffic along this section from down Rio Road to Penn Park and beyond.
I would say I would say you're wrong, and they have to look at that. There are a lot of people who use the sidewalk to walk to John Warner Parkway. There are people who will be walking. It was one of the things they mentioned in Rio Point presentation, who will be walking down to the golf course. So there's playground down there for children. And so you can't say one way or another, Audrey, that's not a judgment you can make. We have to leave it to Daniel to take a look at what might be the pedestrian traffic in that area. But it's more than what you think.
That's fine, but we seem to be focusing only on that than the movement of traffic through there. The amounts of traffic that are going on Rio Road.
Yeah.
These huge numbers. I mean, we started the presentation off with the large volumes, and I just can't get beyond that. That's a huge number of cars. I can't seem to get beyond that. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, well, let's go on. You've got your comment. So Carolyn, Nancy, whatever you gave her as the code does not seem to unmute her. Can you try again, please?
You should be unmuted now.
Okay, Nancy, can you hear and see if you can try to talk?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. So go ahead.
Yes.
Great. Is it my turn?
Yes.
I think your presentation is terrific, and it shows some really forward thinking. Part of our problem here is that we're going to have more traffic. This is an urbanizing area, and we have to treat all property owners equally. And if we give dense zoning to one, we need to look at the possibility of giving dense zoning to another. So the focus that you have in your presentation, from what I can hear, as opposed to what I can see, seems to be right on. Unfortunately, as we urbanize, it does appear that we have a bit of a conflict with Vdot, who really likes to focus on moving traffic and moving traffic fast. And as we urbanize, those 40-mile-an-hour speed limits on Rio are going to have to back down. So I like what I heard, and I look forward to seeing it. I'll probably continue to like it even more. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
Judy, you're next, and then Nicole. I have not forgotten. Go ahead, Judy.
Okay, thank you, Daniel, for your presentation. You mentioned a word, median. I find that as a red flag. We all know how median strips are not maintained. And that worries me that if you're going to put this lovely greenery in, one, who is ultimately going to be responsible for the maintenance? And think about 29 as they increased the number of lanes on 29. They put a median strip in there with lovely greenery and trees. Now they're cutting them down. Think of this past storm. How many trees came tumbling down because of the weather? And I think that we need to, or a suggestion would be perhaps to reevaluate median and greenery.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Judy. And median doesn't necessarily have to be green. I think what I'm trying to indicate is that by the presence of a median, you can begin to create a visual aesthetic, whether it's got rocks in it or, you know, trees in it. I think it's more of a question of what's the character of the roadway where we would try to promote. But your points are all very well taken. I think it's a great conversation to be had, and I think it's worth keeping that at the forefront of our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole, thank you, Judy. Nicole?
Yeah, thanks, Marie. And thanks, Daniel. To try and answer your question, I guess, between the two options, I kind of would jump at the one that narrows the roadway. And I guess that could possibly open it up to, I think right now there's a sidewalk on one side and a shared use path on the other side. Maybe we could have shared use path on both sides. I guess my question to try and figure out the answer is, I just have two questions. So what you showed, the roundabout you showed seemed to be kind of small. And I just know that for like cul-de-sacs, we're often have to put, you know, the radius on those have to be pretty large. Is that with, and this is just me not knowing about civil engineering per se, is the size you showed, are those gonna allow for like buses to turn around, snow plows, that kind of thing? And then my other question is, I think you showed like a crash data. Is there a specific intersection that chose to be more crash? Yeah, I think I remember when they submitted the smart scale for Penn Park that they were getting, there you go, yeah. If putting the roundabout and eliminating some of those intersections would help alleviate some of those crashes, that's also, I guess, a consideration for the roundabout versus the other way. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Nicole. I think the crashes on the corridor, at least this portion of the corridor, seem like they're infrequent enough and not like it's not hitting the same rear ending every afternoon like you might in New York City kind of thing. So it's hard for me to pick up on a trend of what's happening, but obviously intersections are going to be prone to some sort of crash. But ironically, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just 8 crashes between Penn Park and Rio Road. You go on the Vdot website, you can read what the crash was and how it happened. And I know I clicked on one of them. One of them was a deer, of course, that happens in Virginia. One of them was it didn't say drunk driver, but it's single vehicle, just kind of driver. I forget the word they used. It's like a nicer way of saying the person was not paying attention. So one of the things actually we'll be doing in the month ahead is translating this into more of an analytic understanding of the accident. So we'll be able to say more specifically what that data is telling us. It's a good point though. With regard to the roundabout size, that picture that you saw actually is about the smallest roundabout you can make that accommodates all the vehicles that a designer would need to. This is actually right adjacent to a college campus, so we know it's got buses and kids that are in the neighborhood that ride the public school bus. So, and there's a couple ways you mitigate how they can turn. One of them is by the size of the apron. You can see the apron on this roundabout's relatively large compared to the grass area in the middle. So this is actually a pretty good representation of what I think the size of the roundabout at Penn Park might be from a footprint standpoint.
Cool, that's great.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask a couple of questions, if I might, Daniel. First of all, maybe it could be a little bit clearer. If you look at the road there, it's all built up essentially on both sides. So you can't, and it's a 2-lane road, except coming out of Dunlora Forest, there's a hatchback area where you could make a left turn. Beyond that, I don't see any space for it to be widened at all. So I don't understand how the two options that you're proposing. And maybe you could explain that a little bit more.
I'm not sure. Can you see that I just changed to a completely different presentation, or I can't tell if you can see my screen or not?
I can see your screen. Yeah.
Can you see that I'm making a picture bigger?
No.
I have a picture. Okay, hang on. Let me re-stop share. Okay, let me try again. Just making my screen. Okay. Can you see this picture of
Yes.
the front edge of Dunlora Forest with where Raya Point's going across
Right.
the road? I kind of want to disagree with what I heard you say, Marty, if I understood you correctly. I don't think this road is developed on both sides. I think this road is developed on one side. And I think that the development of the other side is coming. And
Yes.
with that will come, with that will come the like this road right here will become like the road I just showed you down by the loft, because they're going to widen the road to the other side. So when they come in, this road's going to end up being this wide, right? Or maybe even wider, because this will become the turn lane on either side. So that will become a turn lane. There'll be a through lane next to that, and then there'll be a turn lane next to that. And so when they widen the road, they're going to go that direction onto their property, and they're going to give that land to the county or Vdot and proffer it over. So as I understand it, the widening's coming. It's just going to go to the other side.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll have to see how the site, I didn't quite read the site that way. I mean, I saw that there were some extra turn lanes on the proposed draft site plan that was included in their proposed amendment. I didn't read it quite as wide, but you may be right. I'm not a civil engineer, so I'm not clear. So you need to look at their site plan a little bit. I'm sure you have a little bit.
Oh, I did all week. I've looked at it pretty much for hours this week. So
yeah,
I know,
okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, if you put a roundabout at Penn Park Road, and the way you drew it, if I understood what you said correctly, was that you could only make a right turn out of Rio Point. Is that right?
That's a very early idea.
If you did that, then you would have all the cars, all 1,800 cars, and half of those would have to go to the roundabout if they wanted to go downtown, and then, or go onto John Warner and then come around 2 roundabouts is what you're proposing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a term for it. I believe the term is called Super Street. It's kind of a modern thing. I'm not saying this is the solution or that it's the solution the whole way down the road.
Okay.
But what it does do is it lets us instead of taking up the entire roadway with turn lanes, it lets us keep the road narrower and use that space for other things like for other users. And so it could be a hybrid. It could be a hybrid of both. I hear what you're saying. If we went with something like this, every single person leaving out of Rio Point is going south to Penn Park, and will either continue south on Rio, or they'll slingshot around and go down to
John Warner.
John Warner. And maybe it's a halfway. Maybe it's it stops right here, and maybe here this remains a full full access intersection.
And then
That's
the
an idea
the
too.
same thing would apply to the people at Dunmore Forest. If they wanted to go down south, now they're gonna have to go around two roundabouts as well.
That's right.
Yeah, that's not,
Yeah,
that's,
it's definitely, again, I'm not, you're hitting us at great points. There's, again, it's gonna, what is our priority here? And is what I'm trying to tease out of everybody. And I'm hearing some really great thoughts. So
okay.
please continue to share if you got more, Marty.
Yeah, the other thing is it's unclear what the long-term outcome is going to be for Rio Commons yet. What happens if it doesn't get built? What do you do then? What's
Well,
is there a different recommendation to the county? Let's say, I don't, you know, it's almost, it's been a period of time yet and there has been no movement on it. It may move, it may not move, I'm not sure. But
yeah, I definitely don't want to speak on behalf of who owns that property and what they can or won't do, but I've seen their drawing package. It's in my computer. I looked at it this week. It seems like they're relatively, and I know that they're having meetings with Rio Point next door to try to figure out how to coordinate various utilities and things. So I have every reason to believe it's still happening.
okay. I mean, the other alternative is you received a letter from the Laura Forest HOA, which was concerned about the speed along this stretch of road and whether there could be some designation of a high traffic area with appropriate speed limits. I'm just quoting that. You've seen that sign. That letter, it didn't go to you directly, but I gave it to David and I think he was supposed to forward it to you.
I may have seen it. I've gotten a lot of documents forwarded to me. I may need to go hunt that one down specifically. But you bring up a good point, Marty, about speed. And, you know, which road do you think is more prone to have speeding? And I bring these two pictures back up.
Oh, I understood.
Which one of those do you think?
I understood it's a trap. It's a trap in the sense that roundabout will slow down in one way or another. I understand the point you're going to go. Yeah. On the other hand, the traffic light also stops the speeding too. Right.
Sure.
And it makes the turn and I'm going to speak for Dunlore Forest, out of that entrance easier to make, because otherwise with the roundabout, well, then we would only be going right as we talked about. But
are you, Marty, are you saying you want to have a traffic light at Dunlore?
No, I'm saying there's a traffic light at Penn Park. Leave it there.
Yeah, maybe so.
So I understand that a roundabout begins to slow down the traffic a little bit. I'm well familiar with that. It's been drummed into us. But on the other hand, it then has those other inconveniences that I brought up. Let me think if there's any other points.
Yeah, there's not a perfect solution here, or anywhere. I think we're trying to see what you folks say that we might learn from as we consider what might be some good options. And maybe we just continue to pursue two options here for a while.
Well, have you also looked, let's say, as I pointed out, the Dunlore Forest, if you make a left turn out of there, there's a hatched area that could be a protected left turn lane, assuming there's a traffic light, right? I think we would like to see that as one of the potential options. I think people in the community would like to see that.
No, just fix my computer. Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll make note of that.
Okay. I have nothing else. Let me ask if Lee has his hand up. Excuse me, Lee.
Well, there's always option 3. And I can share my screen for a second and show it to you, and then you can go from there.
It's Marty's meeting.
Yes, go ahead. If you'll have to unshare, Daniel, and Lee, go ahead, please.
That is, put the roundabout at Dunlore at the, and then make the Rio Point entrance right across from it. That has the advantages of kind of both options. It keeps the rest of Rio Road south of that pretty much intact, handles the pedestrians on both sides, slows down the traffic. So just a thought. That would work as well.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. Definitely think on that a little more. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to, I think we've taken enough time, and David Bennett, you want to close this session, or you have?
No, I was going to ask you, Marty, I know we're kind of running short on time.
Right, I want to finish actually. Yeah.
We do have about 13 people present. I don't know if you want to provide a limited amount of time or maybe invite them to return next month.
I think I would prefer, we have a couple of other things that we'd like to do. Are there any, let me just see what happened. Let me look at participants. Daniel, could you so thanks.
There is no one with their hand up at this time.
There's nobody, yes, that's what I was looking at. So I think we'll just continue as is.
Yeah, this will be continued, and those that are here can follow up with us next month, perhaps.
Thank you.
I do see that Greg McFadden has a hand up. I don't know if you want to call on him. I know Nicole unmuted herself a moment ago too. I don't know if anyone else has like final remarks.
Okay, well, yeah, let me just ask, Ned has his hand up, and then Ned.
I just want to make, I made this comment the last time. You have to, relative to the pedestrian conversation that happened before, the talk about, well, is there a lot of pedestrians there or not? But we're putting pedestrian infrastructure in there now, and it is steadily increasing. So with the folks that are finding, even with that sidewalk getting put in, before the infrastructure was there was a lot of pedestrian getting down to that trail at the parkway. So the cut through, if the Rio Point folks are thinking of allowing another option to connect up with the trail there, but all that pedestrian activity out there. And then as folks maybe think about trying to get to Penn Park, I suspect that's going to start happening as the weather improves and that sidewalk project's done. So we do have to think about, wow, there may not be a lot of pedestrian activity now. What is there now is quite dangerous, especially after dark. But that's something that's going to be a reality in that corridor, not to mention the folks who have been obviously wanting more bike and cycling ability along that corridor as well. So I'm just making sure that doesn't get lost in the thought that is coming based on all the plans that are being followed currently. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're
Yeah,
gonna,
good point.
yeah, that's great. As one of the walkers down on that unimproved area, we love the sidewalk that's being put in place. I can tell you that right now. Okay, so I'd like to move on for the attendees. I saw there was one hand up. We will have more time next time, and we'll try to attend at that point. So I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. Daniel, you want to have some final thoughts? Excuse me, before we move out.
Well, I think my closing remark is this has been really good to hear everyone's thoughts. It gives us some interesting insights to consider over the next month, and we'll come back in a month with some more ideas.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll look forward to that. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the next item, which is liaison updates. Ned, you are first.
Great, I'll go through a list here and then can hit any questions. So at the last, over the last meeting or two, there was a Vdot in transportation quarterly update that happens in the first month of each quarter. So I brought up several things that impacts our kind of watch list at this past meeting. One, I asked them, not thinking of the Belvedere Rio intersection and we've got future plans of thinking of what could be there. So, a smart scale application, it's on the priority list. That'll be going out to the funding. But in the meantime, I've asked them to look to see, since a warrant study hasn't been done as a temporary solution, does it warrant a traffic light? So I've asked staff to look into that and to check into it. I don't think that's the permanent solution, but if a project that goes in there is 3, 5, 7 years down the road, then what do we do in the meantime? We'll see what comes back on that. Rio Point, I asked for some continued follow-up on how that entrance, the main entrance, gets put in. Basically using it as the opportunity to echo my concerns when that application was approved in front of the board. Nancy, the Hillsdale Greenbrier, I've asked for talked about the timing of the prior study and that a new study it's probably time for that. That was addressed to both our transportation folks and Carrie Shepard at Vdot. So that's on my follow-up list now that I've brought it up in a meeting. It looked like there were some nodding heads. There certainly wasn't any objections, so we'll see what can happen there. But just the combination of the traffic, the mechanics of that intersection, the speed, the pedestrians accessing it, all could use a look. In the Woodbrook area, that Brentwood Idlewood intersection, I brought up to take a look there. It seems like there's stop signs on Idlewood when it hits Brentwood, but the traffic going through can be problematic, and there's some speeding concerns there. So I've asked for some follow-up and a look at that, perhaps even a 4-way stop, what the process would be to consider that. There were some trees. Speaking of trees, there were some trees growing out of a couple storm drains on Rio 29. One was even starting to hit some cars' side view mirrors, but Vdot took care of that within a few days of bringing that up, which I appreciated. Let's see. I think all the medians and the maintenance and the public works stuff, that's going to be, that could be a conversation it will be a conversation or a topic during budget process, which kicks off on the 23rd of this year. February 23rd will be when the county executive makes his recommendation for the coming fiscal year budget. The Board of Supervisors, as you can imagine, we've been receiving a lot of emails about property assessment going up, and then obviously interest in what's going to happen with the tax rate. So that all happens during budget season this year. So you want to be paying attention and stay tuned for that. And then the board had an awesome presentation, 2 different topics, the micro transit pilot study, and then also transit, and maybe looking at some sort of regional transit authority or regional body to govern how transit works between city, county, UVA, as next steps of what might that look like. So both of those are moving forward. The micro transit pilot is incredibly exciting to me because, Audrey, we think about how to get from Woodbrook over to Kroger. So it was my opportunity to talk about how to get that. We conceive of a loop of activity happening for the small area plan and getting away from, at least right now, Fashion Square Mall being the attention point, because not a lot of folks are going there, to the other 3 corners that exist where there's more activity. So I'm excited to see and hopeful that micro transit study could be what the new transit operations will be for our area. And that could really open up, and I'm hoping maybe kick off some development to make the small area plan vision come true. But in the meantime, be useful for folks who have to get in a car to basically go, less than a quarter mile across the road to Kroger. That could help with some of that activity for the neighbors in all up and down. Because I think, Peter, if you may have been involved with some of that, it goes all the way down to the center, and then it goes up to, and would go up to the Hollymead area even. But all of that area from Stonefield, the center, all of that could be activated with a micro transit kind of operation, which, that's exciting. So I'm hoping that pans out. But that we're moving forward with the pilot, and we'll see what comes from it. But other than that, that's all I have that I was going to update on, and happy to answer any questions or take any notes for additional follow-up.
So I have, maybe you could clarify about the Belvedere, because I read through the transport vegetation report that you got in January. And what they said was that there would be a smart scale application in March for Belvedere. Is that what, is it actually going to happen, or is it's one of a potential list? That's what I was really
It's on the list to be recommended to be a smart scale application. So the board still has to decide it. We're going through the process.
Okay.
So if it's not, then another project would have to beat that out. I don't, thus far, the board hasn't got into those conversations yet. It's just being brought forward, and that'll play out over the next couple months. But what I'm saying is separate from that.
No, I understood what you're saying. You are going to have a temporary or a light request.
Don't say that we're going to.
No.
I'm saying that if
Yes.
it's warranted, is it
Yeah.
possible? So that's where
Okay.
we're at on that.
Got it. Okay. Yes. Okay. The other thing I was going to bring up in sort of on our watch list, but maybe you can address it now, is we've been focusing on the stormwater management in Woodbrook and Carsbrook. Can you say anything about that? Is there any status on that?
I don't have any status updates on that. That is a bigger picture. I will tell you, I've been receiving more, even in the front of Dunlora, some issues with some stormwater things going on. So they continue to pop up as residents or some of these new homes are dealing with flow as we see them. The Carsbrook and the Woodbrook area, that's a little bit more of established piece. That's going to be a bigger project. So I will continue. That's something I continue to bring up with staff at different points when it's possible for me to have that conversation.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Daniel Bailey, you have anything that you would like to provide?
Marty, I see some other questions there, not to cut you off, but
I'm sorry. Brian?
Sorry. Did anyone else have any concerns about the level of plowing we got last week versus the last like 7 years since I moved here?
The concern about plowing, is that what the question
Yeah, the
was?
level of.
Meaning the lack of, or you're saying?
Yeah, it was
not as good.
very disappointing and out of character in Woodbrook.
Yeah, I
in my
think that's a
opinion.
fair statement countywide.
Was it? Okay. Well, we were pretty unhappy and unnecessarily trapped for like 2 days at my location. So
Well, I know that the response to the second event we had a week later was much better than the first response. Frankly, I think the first response caught the whole VDOT operation off guard. Is certainly 95 and the issues we had in our county and the type of snow was really problematic, and it was a whole different type of event, the next event.
yeah.
But it was a
disagree with
countywide
that.
issue.
I mean, the first storm, we weren't plowed out. And the second one, they went through 36 hours later and did like one pass.
Just make sure you email me on so I know which areas things are happening or not, because I can always forward on. And then
Okay.
there's also a way to put it in. That's a customer driven thing that you can do through VDOT site as well.
Okay.
That you can put, like, if you see a down sign, you can put that through the VDOT site, but same with plowing.
Yeah,
I can,
I've
looking at
never
some of
been-
the,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, looking at some of the other tertiary roads, it looked like they got better clearing in the second event than the first, but I did not go through Woodbrook, so I can't. I'm always happy to send. We've got a lot of interaction with, as you can imagine, with VDOT when we get snow events. So you just have put it on my radar, because then I can get it into the county executives' hands, who are coordinating and working with them.
Okay. Yeah, I've always been okay with the plowing, considering we're in the South and I'm from New England originally. But this is the first year I've been pretty unhappy. So that's why I was wondering whether it was a shared opinion or just happened to be bad luck for us.
I think it was a combination of the time it happened, the type of snow that happened that first event, and then I don't think anybody was anticipating it was going to do what it did.
Don't disagree. Thank you.
Audrey?
I would like to add to what Brian has to say. And even this week, there are many turn lanes that are not plowed. And so coming up 29 to the stoplight at the grade separated interchange, if the lane is kind of blocked, if you come up in the far right lane, you have to turn to go down Rio because it's blocked going up to the stop sign and going through and getting back on to Woodbrook. So there are a lot of edges that of 29 and other even large highways that are not plowed today. It hasn't melted.
I would say put those on the radar through the website because they
I
may not
will.
know that, right? So
Yeah.
they have to be told about it. And if it's a safety
Okay.
issue, they're pretty good to respond if it's clearly a safety concern.
I would thought they would do it since it's on Route 29, not in a little neighborhood. The other
They
thing
just may
is,
not know it still exists because it's
Yeah.
taking a long time for this to melt off.
yeah, thank you. The other thing is I wanted to especially thank you about the traffic or the transit situation. That's going to be a deal breaker in terms of where older people can live if they can't drive. It delays my decision about moving and downsizing and moving to where I can access transportation when I no longer can drive. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how that pilot plays
Yeah,
out. I think that's
yeah.
going to make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Daniel.
Sure, I'll be brief. There hasn't been a lot in the Rio district. One point that I recently came in front of the commission, I think has impacts, especially after the loss of electricity and the storm, is the Boys and Girls Club special use permit to become a community center that is going in over in the Jack Jewett district near the elementary and Albemarle High School area. Did pass the planning commission and is being recommended to the board of supervisors as a community center, which will open up its uses for supporting things like warming center and other things. It's already under construction. That'd be a nice addition to facilities for the county. From my perspective, of course, pending the board of supervisors vote there. And that's about it. If there's any question, happy to answer them.
Questions? Okay, thank you. So last topic, the last item on our agenda is somewhat coded. Does anybody have add anything to the watch list? Let me ask that first. Oh, and then I'll get to you, David. Okay, great. David, go ahead.
Did you want me to do the project update? It's pretty quick. I don't.
Sure. Why don't you do that? Yes.
What I was going to do for y'all today is just give you a brief update on some new projects that have come in and some status of older projects. We've received a new subdivision plat submittal for Belvedere Phase 4B. That's sort of the northern end, or what we call the by right portion of Belvedere. It was just submitted. It's for 56 lots on 24 acres. It's a 2.3 dwelling unit density, dwelling units per acre. That was just submitted and staff comments aren't due on that until February 7th. But if you're interested in that project. We also have a small development on Penn Park Road, a preliminary plat, 1165 Penn Park Road. It's for 4 units on 0.8 acres. And it's zoned R4, and it's reaching that density under the density bonuses as a by right development, and it's providing one affordable housing unit. As mentioned earlier, Dunmore Farm is a project that had been approved July 16th, 2021. That's a preliminary plat. It's for 293 units. On 81 acres. That project, there has been no final site plan submittal on that as yet. So the status is no submittal on that. There are some issues with that development, some pretty significant conditions related to that. So that is the preliminary approval that Nicole was mentioning. And we're in working with the consultant, we're trying to figure out what the best guesstimate to make for that area. if this project doesn't move forward, there is a higher density that's permitted if another development were to come in. But as of right now, even though it has a preliminary plat approval, there's in July, there's been no submittal for a final. And then there's also, as you know, and mentioned earlier, Rio Commons, which is the small development adjacent to Rio Point. An initial site plan was approved also in July of 21, but there has been no final plat submittal and actually no communications with staff from the developer since that point in time. Doesn't mean no submittal will be made, but there has been no additional activity on that piece of property. And of course, as you know, Rio Point was recently approved, and as yet there has been no site plan or subdivision plat submittal on that. So those are some of the bigger projects in this area. I just wanted to give you a quick update on new ones that were submitted and sort of the status of some of the larger or ones that have been discussed here at the meeting in the past. So that's it. If you have any questions on those, I'd be happy to answer them, but that's just a quick status.
Okay, so I have two other things that I'd like to bring up. One be quick and one may take a little bit of time. The first one is, I was thinking maybe we ought to start our meetings a little bit earlier. I was just wanted to get a sense. We're scheduled for 6 o'clock next time. Start them at 5:30. Does anybody have any feeling one way or another about that? I'd just like to hear, that's it. One reason to start it earlier is it might make it easier for the county staff to participate in the meetings, so they don't have to stay late. And does anybody have a feeling one way or another, just out of curiosity right now? We'll decide next time. Yeah, Peter, please.
I would not be able to be there. I'm a member of the RTP, meets till 6 o'clock on 4th Thursday, so
Okay.
it would not work for me, but if it works for everyone else, we'll figure it out.
No. It's just an idea to get a sense. Anybody else have any feeling one way or another? Nancy?
I'm okay with it, but I don't work and I don't have any commitments that would collide. So.
Okay.
Are you wanting to change the meeting to a different day? Is that what you just said? I'm sorry.
No, I don't think the day is gonna, I think the day has worked out fine, I think, for most people. It's really the timing, just to get a sense of if it would be helpful for the staff, really. Because I sense we sometimes have trouble getting, and I've heard that the staff was, they're trying to work within their hours, and so that's the reason to start a little bit earlier. Well, let me explore it a little. Go ahead. A little bit more with David, and we can come back and discuss it. But next week will be 6 o'clock. Next meeting, I should say, not next week. The other thing is this. I asked for it. When I sent out a mail, I was interested if anybody has any topics they'd like to hear over this next year. So I see Todd, you have your hand up.
Yeah, actually I had it up for the earlier start time.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, and I would like to do that. Like you were saying 5:30, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nicole? Yeah, let's, I'll go around one more time and we'll decide next time. Next time will be 6, but then afterwards we'll have a vote on it. Nicole?
Yeah, sorry, maybe this was not the right time, but I was just thinking about two things. I think Peter had mentioned this one time where we were trying to get our agenda out earlier so that it could be on Sean Tubbs' newsletter. I know agendas are hard to put together, so I'm with you, Marty, and thank you for doing what you're doing. Just wanted to throw that out there in case we all kind of forgot, but I know it's hard to do.
It is unfortunate, it's hard. We've tried a little bit, but until we get the commitments and work our way through, it gets published on Monday, and that's the way it works. I don't think I can change it. David, you want to say something?
Yeah, we can try to do it sooner. We're kind of right now we're the next few meetings is probably going to be heavy with the consultant, and with the consultant schedule, sometimes we start to run up to the last minute, but we will certainly try to get it out earlier. Try to make an effort to do that.
So,
Sorry,
go ahead.
one other thing, Marty, and I appreciate your very strict and straightforward meeting running. We always finish in a good time frame, but I think it would be good to have the public speak a little bit more, if that's at all possible to do. I think that's a good thing. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Okay, no, that's a good comment. I hadn't, this one was heavy and I was trying to get through a lot of mechanics, but I'll try to make a point to make sure we have the public speaking if they have questions.
Cool.
Okay, so let me go back to topics again. One of the topics that I thought that I've been trying to get scheduled is to have the architectural review architects come and speak before us. Not necessarily to get there. We have a small area plan, and we have a sort of an odd. We've had sites that have gone up that, to me, in an entrance corridor that don't look very attractive, and it would be interesting to hear their long-term philosophy. So that's one area that I thought sometime over the next couple of months we could schedule the architects from the Architectural Review Board to come. And Ned, I may need your help because I've been trying to do this for 6 months now, and it hasn't come about. So that would be one thing I think I would like to try, not to staff, but just to get the architects themselves to give us, they have some points of view. It'd be interesting to hear it.
You're speaking of the current members
Yes.
that make up the ARB.
Yeah, get 1 or 2 of the members to come. The other thing that struck me, I was aware of the budget process. Is there a way that you, besides writing emails, that we could be participating in the budget process a little bit more heavily?
There'll be a series of public hearings throughout. This is typically the time frame. Like in the past, I have done town halls, and I've partnered up with Diantha McKeel on town halls that we've done in the past. So between the public hearings and the town halls, that's a chance to get out and do the participation. There's not any, I'm trying to remember, I think they've even done some, I'm trying to remember last year or a year or 2 ago that they did some road shows or some other type of town halls on the budget.
Mm-hmm.
When that comes up, when the county executive makes his recommendation, if there's anything beyond the typical public hearings or what the supervisors do for town halls, I'll put that down as a note to go, what other opportunities are there to participate?
Yeah, because I think sidewalks, you mentioned sidewalks and the sidewalks on Penn, on Rio, but and the fact that there's going to be more traffic on Penn Park Road, that would be an area that would be interesting to really focus some attention on, see if we could get some funding to do the sidewalks, to complete on Penn Park Road, at least part of the way down to where the path starts around the golf course.
Yeah, I think the corridor study should help us try to realize some of that, but I think all of that's going to activate. And just doing sidewalks on one side of it, like just Rio Road itself, one side's not going to get it done. It's going to have to be on both sides.
Okay. So with that, I think I will call this meeting finished. Does anybody have any last thoughts? David?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick note. I don't know if any of you have worked with her very much, but Michaela Accardi is a planner in our long range planning group. She staffs the CAC North and Hydraulic. She's actually leaving us. Her last day will be Friday. So the staff that staffs the CACs and does the long range planning, we're going to be a little a little more shorthanded here for the next month or two until we can get that position filled, but just wanted to let you know. And I do think some of you may have worked with her in the past. She was a great staff person. We're going to miss her. So I just wanted to just let you know that and be a little forewarned. I think we will be able to stay on schedule and do everything, but we'll be a little bit tighter covering the CACs for a little while. That's it.
Okay.
I
Thank
did
you.
work with her. Fabulous.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting. I wish everybody a warm week, and we will see you next month on February 24th at 6, and then we'll talk about a little revisit and see if we should have a little bit earlier time. So thank you all. It was very good. We had some good comments. Take care.